All right, good morning. Welcome to the El Dorado Irrigation District Board Meeting, February 26th, 2024, and 9:01 a.m. Could we have roll call, please?
Directors Osborne, Dwyer, Day, Veerkamp, Annanzini present, General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, and Clerk to the Board Sullivan. Oh, I have 9, but you have 9:01. Okay, we'll do 9:01.
Yep. Thank you, and please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I just flashed on a memory. I think it was Bill George during the Pledge of Allegiance. Always, he did it at a slightly different cadence than the rest of us. And we'd all. Yeah. Well, no, he was a young man back then. So, all right, sorry. All right. Do I have a motion to adopt today's agenda?
So moved. Second.
All right, motion and a second. Is there any public comment on the adoption of today's agenda?
Before I call public comment, can IT remove this little box on our screen here if you want to come in or help us out here?
That was fast.
Thank you. Can you just use the mouse to get rid of this? Thank you. If members of the public would like to address the board on the adoption of today's agenda, please refer to page 2 for instructions. Director Day, it appears we're ready for the vote on the adoption of today's agenda, moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Veerkamp.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. Jim, any employee recognition this morning?
None today and no report under communications either. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any public comment on an item not on today's agenda related to EID?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to page 2 of today's agenda for detailed instructions. Director Day, does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak.
All right, thank you. Jennifer, do you have any communications?
None today, thank you.
All right, Lori, do you have anything?
No, sir.
Pat, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I did attend the Water Agency Board meeting, my first one as a member, and their focus was on lobbying, both at the state and federal level. I think we need to make sure that our lobbyist, Bob Reeb, is in tune with exactly what they're doing because they have different contracts. And it didn't sound like we were marching lockstep toward the goal. So I would encourage, I don't know how to do that. You, Brian, I think have the influence to make that happen. Also, their CEO, Rebecca Gao, I invited her to come tour our major facilities so she better understands what's happening. And she graciously agreed to do that. And Jen and Dan have put together an agenda for three different sessions. So I think that'll be very, very helpful. Jen and Dan, that sounds like a group from the 70s, doesn't it? But I think it'd be very helpful to have her put her eyes on the infrastructure and some of the challenges that we have. End of report.
Thank you.
Nothing of importance other than a lot of people I've seen are very, very happy to see Sly Park spelling. So, and it's good for our water supply for the rest of this year. So, a lot of people have commented to me, they say, we think of you when the water's running. So,
I've heard them say they thank you when they flush the toilet, but.
well, that too.
I would just, on that note, I miss our water reports. If maybe we could take a look at where we stand next month. Hopefully, we're okay. Doesn't seem like it was terrible or great.
Yeah, we can provide an update on that. It's a little early in the season because you have all of March, but we'll get something on the calendar.
Okay, thank you. All right, do I have a motion to approve today's consent calendar?
So moved. Second.
All right, motion and a second. Is there any public comment on today's consent calendar?
If members of the public would like to address the board on the adoption of today's consent calendar moved by Director Veerkamp and seconded by Director Dwyer, please refer to page 2 of today's agenda for detailed instructions. Director Day does not appear there. Any members of the public wishing to speak on the adoption of today's agenda?
All right, please vote.
Excuse me, I meant to say the adoption of today's consent calendar, not agenda.
Yes.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
All right, we'll move to information item number 4.
Good morning. My name is Nicole Graham, and I'm the Environmental Compliance Supervisor here at the district. I'm here today to update the board on the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, Cycle 5, as it relates to recently collected monitoring data in the drinking water system and the main water system. The summary of issues are the Safe Drinking Water Act mandates the US EPA issue a list of unregulated contaminants every 5 years. These contaminants are to be monitored by all public water systems, or most public water systems. It's important to note that this is unregulated contaminants in addition to the regularly monitored, regulated contaminant monitoring that we already do on a very consistent basis. The 5th Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule was published in December 2021. UCMR 5 requires sample collection of over 30 chemicals. In 2023, the district completed over 90% of this monitoring in the main water system. The public notification rule mandates that all systems notify their customers of UCMR results no later than 12 months after receiving the data, and that's one reason why I'm here. So the rest of this presentation is going to be presented in a sort of question answer format to give the board a little more information about the rule itself and some very specific information about UCMR 5. So the first question you might have is, what is the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule? Well, the UCMR is an initiative by the EPA to monitor emerging contaminants of concern. So those are the new things that keep coming up every couple of years that we didn't think about 20, 30 years ago. And it also keeps up to date with new health data that might be coming about chemicals that could be in drinking water, as well as increase and better testing in laboratories. The monitoring occurs every 5 years. So every 5 years, we get a new list of things to look for, in addition to those regulated contaminants that we already look for. And the data is used for setting future regulatory drinking water standards. The next question you might have is, who is required to participate? Well, the EPA separates drinking water systems into 3 categories based on population served. The first population is very small water systems that serve less than 3,300. Your next category is those water systems that serve between 3,300 and 10,000, and then large systems that serve over 10,001. The EPA is going to target those very small water systems, and we have 2 of those. Those are our Strawberry and Addingdale systems, and they're going to look nationwide and pick about 800 of them to participate. This year, Addingdale and Strawberry were not selected, so we don't have any data for them. We don't have any small water systems, but if in the United States, there's about 5,000 of those, and then for large water systems, there's about 4,000, and all large water systems are required to participate. So if everybody participates on this, the EPA is going to be collecting about 10,000 water systems data. So they're going to get a really good idea nationwide if these emerging contaminants of concern are in drinking waters across the country. The next question you might have is, so what are in the UCMR 5? What are we going to test for? UCMR specifies monitoring for 29 per polyfluoroalkyl substances, also known as PFAS, and lithium. You might have heard of PFAS before. It's in the news a lot lately. Sometimes goes by the name of PFAS, PFOA, Gen X chemicals, or forever chemicals. Those are usually found in nonstick cookware, stain-resistant fabrics, carpets, cosmetics, firefighting foams, electroplating, and products that resist grease, water, and oil. Lithium is a naturally occurring metal. It's often used in manufacturing, like lithium batteries. They're finding it sometimes it can be in food, and it's also used in several pharmaceuticals. So the EPA is just kind of trying to figure out a little bit more about that particular metal. So where and when are samples to be collected? For surface water systems, which is exclusively the main water system, we only have surface water. We're supposed to sample from the finished water leaving the plant 4 times during a consecutive 12-month period, and the samples must occur 3 months apart. Monitoring period is from 2023 to 2025. So water systems have that time frame to collect all the data. We can ask for a variance of the schedule, and we did have to in the main water system because Reservoir 1 only typically doesn't operate in Q4. So we did get 3 monitoring data, and we'll pick up the 4th one sometime in 2024. So what does UCMR participation involve and who pays, right? Big question. How much does it cost a water system to do these unregulated monitoring? So for large water systems, we are required to collect the samples. We are also required to coordinate with the laboratory. So laboratories actually have to submit qualifications and demonstrate competency to the EPA directly. They're not operated by the EPA, they just have to show competency by the EPA. And so there are many labs in the United States that are, and we contracted with one of them on a competitive bid. We pay for all shipping and we pay for all costs. And we're expected to spend about $11,000 when we complete the monitoring. So how did the EPA select these UCMR for contaminants? It's very unique for UCMR 5. The National Defense Authorization Act required in 2020 that the EPA select all PFASs when there was an actually regulated test method that was reliable to look for. So they said, hey, we're going to tell you what to do. You might have done it a different way in the past, but we're going to tell you look for all of these as long as you have a good test method and there isn't already a drinking water regulation associated with it. They also consider contaminants of interest from previous candidate lists and public input, and I think that's where lithium came from. So what were the monitoring results of UCMR 5? So now we know what does it cost, and now what did we find, right? So to date, the district has conducted 11 monitoring events, and only 1 contaminant was detected, perfluoropentaconic acid at 0.0032 parts per billion. And the minimum reporting limit was 0.003, and those numbers are really close. The MRL is defined as the smallest measured concentration of a substance that can be reliably measured. So I like to explain that as that's the sensitivity of the test that can be reliability. Like nothing lower do they think they can consistently report on. So you can see those numbers are very, very close. This single detection was in the finished water from Reservoir 1 in Q1. We collected follow-up samples in Q2 and Q3, and they were not confirmed. They were all non-detect. So where can consumers find UCMR 5 results? All water systems are required to to submit their results from UCMR5 to the EPA database. And that database is available to the general public. So that's one way people can find out if they have these constituents in their drinking water. We are also required in the public notification rule to let all of our customers know about these results or the availability of these results within 12 months of finding the results. Our first results came back in about mid-April, so we're required to notify them. And in your board packet, you would have seen a draft notice that we created to send out to all customers in the main water system that they can see the data or ask questions about it. And then we're also required to report them in the Consumer Confidence Report or the Annual Water Quality Report. And what's unique about that one is those regulations say only report the detected results to your customers. And you might think, well, why don't we tell them all of that? We sample for hundreds and hundreds of things in a year. And so the idea of that regulation is it might be overwhelming to customers to see all these non-detects. So they say on this one, only show them the detects that you have. So then they don't get to see all the non-detects, but we had so many non-detects for UCMR5, they wouldn't even necessarily know that was the case. So that's kind of why they have us do it this two-tiered way of like notifying our customers. So what are the benefits of the UCMR program? Well, it helps EPA get a national representation of what's happening in drinking water across the country, like which areas actually have these emerging contaminants of concern and how prevalent it is. It also helps them figure out regulations, what regulations they should be setting them at, public health risks about it. And then it also is beneficial to the customer because then they get to know if these things they're hearing about in the media is actually showing up in their drinking water. So they can have more confidence if they're not. And if it happens to be showing up, maybe we and other agencies can sort of give them more health information about those emerging contaminants of concern. So in summary, I think this is a really good news story. We're almost complete with our monitoring and only one result detected a little bit for one of these emerging contaminants of concern, and all the follow-up was non-detect. And lastly, the district has a very rigorous monitoring program. And historically, all of our data from our source water has shown it to be very safe to drink. So in that, are there any questions?
Yeah, just a comment that this was a good write-up. And when we first started doing this, I was kind of like, well, why are we doing this? Seems like, oh, but actually reviewing it and your write-up and understanding now, it's basically like a national study, a national survey, so they can look for those trends and such. It makes a lot of sense, actually.
I believe so too. I mean, you can't get everything right 40 years ago, right? So this is just a way to get more information about our public water system at a national level. So I completely agree.
Yeah. George?
I was curious, I don't know how to pronounce that chemical.
Good,
but,
sure I did either.
any indication of where that came from? Is that because of the new piping issue or something? What's indicative to that small percentage of bad chemical?
So you're wondering like why we even had a blip at
Yeah.
Reservoir 1. I think it's so close to that reporting limit of the test. And oftentimes when we look at data, whether it's this date or other day, we sort of take that minimum reporting limit and do kind of a plus or minus. So I kind of consider that sort of a ground level. It's also new times that they've been testing for these at the labs. So sometimes things just kind of show up. It's also just unique is that when we sample for it, we actually take a lot of time in what we're wearing and what we have around us when we collect these samples because they're so prevalent in plastics and such.
Okay.
So like there's like this list of things: don't wear makeup, don't wear sunscreen, don't wear rain-resistant clothing, make sure.
I don't wear makeup.
Right, right, exactly. So, this could be anything. We also might be interesting is we also take field blanks
Yeah.
to make sure that we open it to the environment to make sure that the environment doesn't have something into it. So there's lots of things that we do to try to minimize that. I don't know. All I can tell you is it was one so close, and then our follow-up data would indicate that it's not consistently there.
I would honestly tell you, people come from the valley with 5-gallon empty plastic bottles in their pickup and fill it up to take it back. Our water is such of high quality that people take it back for their drinking water in the valley.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, there was a couple questions that I had. One, I know we're posting this on our website. Is it easy to get to?
I can try to work.
Never is.
Okay,
When I
okay.
get on there, I can find
Okay.
half the stuff, but is it easier? And the other part is, whoop. Thank you. I forgot about the microphone. I think you could hear me. Anyway, the other part of it was, with the changes of, as you've noticed, that there was the type of pans that people use now, and I'm always cognizant of that, and anybody who's gone through health crises realize, wait, and then do we want to go back to good old cast iron? Quite frankly, the amount of rock in our area is almost like a pumice stone itself, but stopping the mineral contact taste, sometimes, because I'm in Cameron Park, the water tastes a little bit chlorinated. And that's what I get complaints from in parts of the eastern part of El Dorado Hills customers, Cameron Park, but I always try to assure them that it is okay. But the other question I had was, when we are cleaning our utensils and stuff, say for instance pots and pans that are coated, and it goes into the system for recycling, does it pick that up at the recycled level?
We anticipated that a question, so
Thank you.
so Tracy and I talked about who might be a
Because
good
that
person
would
to
be a
answer that.
question beyond that I would receive.
Good morning,
Well,
Director
some
Ancini.
people do.
So we were required to do this same PFAS testing. The EPA put it on us. We did it quarterly for a year. It started in the fourth quarter of the year 2000, and we had to test influent and effluent from each of our treatment plants for a year. At that time, the detection limit of the test was 70 micrograms, and all of our tests were below the detection limit. So good for us back then, but however, in the period of time since then and now, that detection limit has dropped considerably, so we wouldn't be surprised to see them come back and say, now we want you to retest at these lower limits. But the information that we have now from the testing that we did was all below the detection limit of the test at the time.
So most of the testing is up the hill.
Well, our testing was at the treatment plant.
Right,
so
at your
El Dorado
treatment
Hills
plant.
And Deer Creek's wastewater
Right.
treatment plant.
So once it gets there, but somebody had said, well, nobody drinks the water. That is not true, because people put the water and grow their vegetables with it, so people do. I'm sorry, a lot of people in Serrano do, but,
What we know today, it was below all the detection limits at
Right.
the time.
okay,
But we are anticipating there's a possibility they may come back to us and
Right.
say, we'd like you to test down at these lower levels.
okay. Thank you.
Just if I could just, Nicole's actually more of an expert at this than I am, but the district, as part of its permit to operate its recycled system, is required to actually inspect all of its connections, including front and backyard connections, to make sure that our customers are not improperly utilizing the recycled water system. And so the district lives up to that. It is very rigorous. I don't know how many of these we do, but literally every connection is inspected on a regular basis to make sure that we're operating our system in compliant with our permit. So just wanted to make sure that that was in the record.
What I can tell you, just to add to that, is we have roughly 5,000 recycled water connections in residential areas. And so we visit every one of those homes and look in their backyard every year and look to ensure that people are up to date on the requirements to have that recycled water in front and backyard. And we're not always popular.
No. Any other board questions or comments? No, is there any public comment or question?
If members of the public would like to address the board on information item number 4, please refer to page 2 of today's agenda. There's no action on this item. Director Day does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak.
All right, thank you, Nicole. Nice job. All right, we'll move to action item 5, warrant registers to pay our bills. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll be recusing myself on this item.
Okay, Director Veerkamp will be recusing himself. Do I hear a?
I'll move for option one on item, action number 5.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All right. I don't see any board question or comment. Is there any public comment on action item number 5?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 5, option 1, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Dwyer, with Director Veerkamp recusing himself, please refer to page 2 of today's agenda. President Veerkamp does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 5.
Lasting impression, Alan, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Oh,
That's all right.
President.
It's still the new year.
Yes, and I keep just saying Director Day, so I'm so proud of myself for saying President. Sorry,
That's all right.
President Day.
All right, thank you. Please.
Is that the first time I said that?
Yeah,
Okay.
please vote.
President Day.
There you go.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
All right, thank you. We'll move to action item number 6.
Morning, Tracy.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Morning, Tracy.
Get this microphone in the right place here. Tracy Eden Bishop, an engineer here at the district. And this agenda item is for a design contract amendment and a funding request for the Reservoir A valve replacement project. Previous board actions include the board approving, awarding a contract for valve purchases ahead of the construction contract in April of '23. October of '23, the board adopted the CIP, which this project was part of. And at that same board meeting, the board awarded a construction contract for the installation of the valves. Excuse me. The issues for discussion today include the need for a design contract amendment for work that's already been completed. Also, the contractor has encountered multiple construction conflicts, and we will be exceeding our project contingency budget. I'll talk about that some more. And we also have additional funding needs for other construction services. So I just wanted to start with a little bit of background. This is an aerial view of the Reservoir A water treatment plant. And the filters are there in red, and that's where the valves are being replaced. So Reservoir A is the largest water treatment plant the district has, and it's responsible for about 2/3 of the water supply to district customers. This is a close-up of the filter complex, and it consists of 3 clusters of 4 valves each, or 4 filters each. And the filter valves, the inlet valves, are at the end of their useful life, so they do need to be replaced. They are pretty critical infrastructure. If one of those valves fails, we could have a whole cluster of filters go out of service. So we're replacing them to avoid that potential service disruption. The first discussion item is the design contract amendment. Waterworks Engineers is our design engineer for this project, and they have incurred some additional scope of work. They've had to make some piping modifications associated with the addition of some safety platforms around the valves to make the valves safe to work on. And also, we had to rebid the project. If you recall, we rejected all bids the first time we bid the project, and then rebid the project. So there's some added effort for them for that work as well. So they are requesting an amendment for about $30,000 because of the increased effort. And this amendment's before you today because it exceeds the general manager's authority of $100,000 for CIP contracts. Next, okay, we're good, good. The second discussion item is related to construction challenges we've been having. We have had a little bit of a rocky start. The contract was supposed to start, or the construction was supposed to start January 1st. And we had another contractor working on site, a filter media contractor. They were supposed to be done by January 1st, so we could move right in and start on the valve work. But because of the filter media being a little bit out of spec, so the material in the filters that does the filtration being out of spec, and we had some winter weather disturb their schedule, they were not out of there soon enough. So we had about a 21-day delay for the filter valve contractor. We also ran into some materials that needed some special handling. So all in all, about 42 days of delay. And for a 3-month construction window, you can see how that would impact the project. And we do anticipate that we'll have to do some of that work next winter. So probably the last filter cell. We'll probably get through the first 2, but the last one will have to be done next winter. So we have had multiple change orders also that will exhaust our construction contingency. And this had to do with during design, a lot of the areas the contractor was going to be working were inaccessible. And so when the contractor started work, they started opening things up. They just found a lot of conflicts because the as-built drawings were not correct. So that is the reason for some of these changes. So the original project contingency budget the board approved was $192,000. We've had a design contract amendment since then of about $18,000. Construction change orders to date of $80,000. And so that leaves us $94,000 remaining in our project contingency budget. So we do anticipate another $109,000 in change orders. We're negotiating with a contractor for those right now. The details, we're working those out now.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
You said that some of the design. Okay, thank you for catching that. Some of the design contract, the reason why we're doing the amendment is it wasn't calculated correctly by the contractor to begin with, or us?
It was the as-built drawings that the designer had to use to do this next phase, to design the next phase of installing new valves.
So it was the designer.
Yes, but they could only rely on our record drawings for their design.
Okay.
And so when the contractor opened everything up to start working, it's like, oh, that wasn't built the way the plans showed. And so we just kind of, it's like when you do a remodel, you open the wall up and it's, wow, that's not what I thought I was going to get.
And it's an 11% above the contingency.
Yes.
Or
11%, I'm sorry, 11%
We're gonna
of
catch
the
you.
design,
Yeah.
of the design contract.
correct. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
and normally we see, we plan usually for 10% contingency,
Right.
and we're up at 11 right now, so we're not too far off. But
Okay, thank you.
so we do need another $100,000 to finish up the construction contract. And I do have some good news. The next slide. The work is actually starting, has started. It was a painful start, but so the valves that we pre-purchased are up in the left-hand corner of this slide. So the valves on the left, the valve stem extensions, and then the actual operators. So this is just a picture of them sitting on the factory floor after they were assembled. And the lower left-hand corner, this is the new piping that's going in at each filter. So everything you see here is times 12. So it looks kind of simple when you just see a couple of pipes, but it's times 12 filters. So you can see they're installing the valve has been installed at the end of that pipe, kind of looking towards us. And the picture on the right-hand side, upper right-hand side there, the valve extension is being put back on, and then the lower right-hand corner, that's some of the electrical work that's being done at each filter. We also have other funding needs to cover the increased level of effort to investigate and resolve the construction conflicts. So we need a little extra funding for construction management, inspection, and for capitalized labor. Excuse me. So moving on to funding. For this project, there's about 2.4 million, it was identified in the CIP, the 2024 CIP, and the funding to date is about 2.4 million. So with an extra 100,000 for construction changes and contingency, 30,000 for the waterworks contract amendment, 25,000 for construction management, 20,000 for inspection services, and 15 for capitalized labor, we're requesting $190,000 for in additional funding. And just to recap, this table summarizes the overall project funding since project inception. The general manager approved initial funding of $95,000. The board awarded a valve purchase contract of $250,000. Construction award by the board was $2 million. Funding to date, $2.4. Additional funding request, $190,000 for a total project funding of $2.6 million. Board options. Option 1, approve a contract amendment to Waterworks engineers in the amount, a not to exceed amount of $29,951 for additional design services, and authorize additional funding of $100,111 for construction change orders and contingency, $25,000 for construction management services, $20,000 for inspection services, and $15,000 for capitalized labor, for a total funding request of $190,062 for the Reservoir A filter valve replacement project. Option 2. Okay, and we're recommending option 1. Thanks, Jen. Any questions?
Are there any questions?
Mr. Chair, I'll move option 1.
All right. We have a motion. Did you have a
I'll
question?
second.
Mark? Go ahead. Okay, go ahead, Pat.
Okay, thanks. I have a couple of questions. One is, will the new valve situation allow for us to isolate the filter banks so that we can continue operation, or is it going to be the same when we turn one off, they all go off?
Yeah, not necessarily. So I don't know if Patrick is still in the room.
He snuck out.
anywhere. He could speak to that. We are going to be replacing 5 sets of valves over the next 5 to 10 years, these old valves. So that is going to be a consideration for the next couple of projects to see if we can figure that out. So yes, we are looking into that, but not with this project.
Not this one.
Not with this
But future
project.
contracts will allow isolation of those filter units, so
They
we
will.
don't have to take the whole system down.
Yeah.
Especially since it's so key in our total supply.
Yes.
The second, I guess, is more of a comment, and it's common throughout a lot of industries, is the design drawings and the as-built drawings, well, as-built condition are many times different,
Yes.
and the drawings usually don't get updated. The design drawings usually don't get updated to incorporate things that happen during the construction installation period. What are we doing to try to remedy that?
So we do require that as-built drawings be kept throughout construction. So every change order, we take tons of pictures, and part of the contractor's responsibility and part of the designer's responsibility is to document all of that. So by the end of the day, when we put those files into our system, everything should be.
Should be right, yeah.
Should be right.
Okay. And then my final comment is, or maybe request, is I will vote to approve this amendment. However, It seems like Waterworks, I think last board session, we had 2 change orders for Waterworks. This is another one. If we look back a little bit, I don't think these are isolated events. I'd like to ask staff and Jim to do a review of our Waterworks contract, because there just seem to be too many change orders, and I know it's common in industry, but I'd like to have a review of, what were the bid, and I know Waterworks has been the low bidder, but they're also bidding on some really, are approved by us to do some design for major rehab of our treatment plants, and we don't want to see this kind of parade of change orders coming in that are going to drive our costs more than we allocated in our capital improvement. Is that clear?
We'll do it.
Thank you.
Lori, go ahead.
Yes, just one comment. I guess what we want to be careful of Waterworks becoming a sole source contractor. And that just avoids all bidding costs. So I'm glad you pointed that out. Every time I've seen the Waterworks change, I'm going, wait a minute, this is another one, and it's another one. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Well, and Jim, and when looking at that and bringing it back to us, the questions are, were these changes things that either we could have anticipated or they could have anticipated, or as in this case, I totally get that the way something is built, have been in design and construction for a long time, a lot of times gone back and my design was not done the way I designed it, and they just changed everything, and it makes it very hard to go back and make repairs, because then you don't know where things are and that sort of stuff. So I totally get that. But again, should we have maybe taken a peek inside before? I don't know what the cost of that would have been. Anyhow, just some ideas to follow on with the other suggestions.
Yeah, we'll bring back the reasons for the change orders as well.
Yeah, just to step in real quick, John Money, engineering manager for the district. So 2 things. One, we have had several Waterworks change orders to date. A lot of that has been additional work that the district has come along for a lot of the same reason. We don't have adequate records, or we've added additional scope because we limit the scope up front to try to minimize our costs, and then we've added additional things as we've found them necessary. Excuse me. This plant in particular is very problematic in that it's a packaged plant, or was initially a packaged plant. And so the district saves money up front by putting this packaged infrastructure in. It comes in as a big unit. It makes it much more difficult because things like this aren't typically, it comes in as a unit. We're not as building it as the contractor is building the walls and putting the guts in, et cetera. So it's a little bit of a different animal, and that's a lot of what we ran into. For instance, the grading to access a lot of this equipment was all tack welded down, which limited the design engineer's access to getting in there and actually analyzing the basis or the basins. I did also want to say that these new valves will allow for each filter cluster to be isolated. And that's part of the reason we're doing this project, is so that it doesn't take down the whole section of 4 clusters. It's each individual cluster can now be taken down by itself. So just want to kind of raise that, and I want to kind of give a prelude to, there's another section of valves that also need to be replaced here in the near future. We might be out a couple of years, but the actual finished water valves that come out of this are also in very substandard, very hard to service vault. Again, because these are packaged units, so they're easy to assemble. It's easy to do that in the factory, but when you get out there and actually service this equipment, it's much more difficult to access this equipment and figure out how they put it together in the factory versus how you make it serviceable long-term. So that's another project that's coming. It hasn't been identified in the CIP yet, but it's another, for a very critical facility. It's another project that will be upcoming, and we anticipate that we may run into some of these same issues. So there's a little bit, I want to be very, cognizant that we are very aware of change orders, and we track those, and we have lots of discussions on those before we bring them to the board. At that same time, when we come into this additional work and these additional items of scope, that a lot of times it just kind of is what it is, and then that's when we bring it back to you and have these discussions.
Thank you, John. George?
Just a little history. Tracy can remember some of this, and some of Brian, and some of, we used to get contractors that would way underbid for stuff and then expect to get change orders. And the board finally came to the conclusion that unless it was something that we had unanticipated, you live with it. You bid it, you live with it. Because it's impossible to budget when you keep adding change orders. So I understand this one. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility in all of this stuff, but just contractors need to understand, when you bid it for EID, you're gonna live with it.
All right, thank you. Any public comment on this item?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 6, option 1, moved by Director Veerkamp and seconded by Director Dwyer, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Day. Does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 6. I believe we are ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you, Tracy. All right, we'll be moving to closed session, item A. General Counsel, do we have a time estimate?
Thank you, President Day. The board will be meeting in closed session to discuss one matter, which is described on today's agenda as closed session item A. I anticipate that the board's discussion of this matter will take approximately 20 minutes.
All right, so we'll be back no sooner than 10 minutes after 10, but it may be later.
For the purposes of this Zoom session, the meeting is not closed. However, the Zoom session will end and we will open no sooner than 10:10. However, it could be after, once the board concludes their closed session.
All right, we're back from closed session at 10:17 a.m. General Counsel, do we have anything to report?
Yes, thanks, President Day. The board met in closed session on closed session matter A and took one reportable action. On a motion by Director Veerkamp, seconded by Director Dwyer, the board unanimously authorized the district to hire the Downey Brand law firm to represent the district in the matter referred to in the agenda description, and authorize funding of up to $250,000 toward that matter. And that concludes my report.
Any review of assignments? I don't think we had any.
We have Director
Well, we do have
Day
one, that's right.
requested that the water supply, our water supply reporting at the next meeting. And the Director Dwyer also requested some additional information on a contractor, but I believe that is not a report, it's just a memo to the board, correct, Director Dwyer?
Well, a review of change orders for that contractor, yeah.
As a memo to the board?
I think an information item would be better.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, I think that's it. It's 10:18 and a half or so. Meeting adjourned.